Hello, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about our sponsor, Anchor, hopefully at a louder volume this week. First of all, it's free and it has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. I found it really easy to move the segments around in the editing process, and you can put the ads in wherever you want too, which is really helpful. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. This has been super helpful with the success of my first episode, having it on all of these platforms for you guys to listen to. And Anchor does that for you, which makes it super easy. And you can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership, which is perfect for people like me who are just starting a brand new podcast. So it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. If you've been thinking about a podcast you want to start, this is me encouraging you to do it. All you got to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm. That's ANCHOR.FM to get started.
Hello, and welcome back to Navigating Adulthood and IDD. Today is a very special episode in that we are recapping all of the awesome discussions and resources from 2020. I got this idea from my friend Trisha's podcast, Music Therapy Chronicles, where they looked back on the last year's episodes in 3 different parts. And I was inspired by this reflection and curious to see what Navigating Adulthood and IDD's recap would look like too. So I only post currently once a month, so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to feature every episode, every awesome guests that we've had, and be reflective, looking back at these episodes of the last year, while also creating an episode where it would be easy to share with others. So that everyone could get a taste of each episode and what this podcast is all about, which is providing resources for professionals working with adults with IDD and spreading more awareness for working with adults with different disabilities. So please go and check out Music Therapy Chronicles if you're into music therapy podcasts. It is excellent. And today we're going to dive into 5 different themes that came up over the last year on this podcast. And those themes are resources, employment, strengths, neurodiversity, and experts/person-centered therapy. So we're going to listen back to clip highlights from this previous year from each guest. So first we're going to look back at episode 2 with Christine Devereaux, where we'll focus on the topic of resources or lack thereof for professionals. Christine surveyed different recreation therapists to pinpoint the biggest needs and challenges for professionals, and she shared her survey with us in her podcast episode. And so here we kind of break down the survey in this clip.
So let's see. Okay, so we wanted to look at what are the underlying problems that cause the most significant challenges, basically to provide the independence and to do your job as you see how you want to do your job. Mm-hmm. So most of the people that responded with challenging behaviors. I worded this differently, but it's challenging behaviors. And one thing that I saw too, and which was great to get the directors and managers input, was motivation of staff was very high for manager level. If you look on, let's see, page 12, that comes in about 3rd place. So for managers. But then when you look at like most important needs, so there's challenges and then there's needs. And so we broke needs up into like funding, internal support, resources, staff pay. Those are like departmental needs. Most people said funding. And this was another interesting thing. And I think just overall, we don't have to go through the full survey. I'd be curious to hear your questions, but I felt, so the survey brought up more questions for me actually, as I think a lot of surveys do, but the most important need was funding. And then second to that for managers was staff accountability, but second to funding for at the actual service providers, not in a managerial position, was internal support.
Oh, wow.
So that is very interesting. So the service providers are saying we need more support and we need more funding. And then the managers are saying we need more funding and we need staff to be more accountable.
Right.
And then you could go off on a million different ways, but I feel like, if staff got more internal support, maybe they'd be more accountable. It's just kind of interesting the way the numbers came back for a lot of that.
What I found was interesting was that the number one like problem I'm struggling with was like challenging behaviors, kind of like having these clients that you're having a hard time like trying to figure out how to help, but then the most important need is funding, which I think that just says a lot.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
That's a great point.
because there's no funding anywhere. And
Yes.
but then number 3 comes in with resources.
Yes.
And showing that need. So that does correlate with the problem. That's the biggest.
Exactly. And so, yes. And so still for the staff saying, and staff, I mean like direct service providers, not manager levels, that was their number 3. But before and ahead of that was staff accountability for managers, which I find
right
very interesting because personally, I felt that same way. If I had more resources to support, to even educate myself to help people with challenging behaviors, or for different interventions or whatever, making sure we have quality products and safe tools and equipment, stuff like that. I think we would have seen less overturn.
Right. And then the staff said internal support was the second biggest need, which I feel like can go along with give me resources or supervision. So it's interesting. The managers are like staff accountability, and then like the staff's like, please, we need resources. We need internal.
Yep. That like it gives me goosebumps still, because when that came back, we were like, no way. There is, and then you can see the conflict between the managers and their staff. There's different perspectives there that's directly impacting the quality of care.
Right. The next topic that was highlighted in 2020 was employment. So first we'll listen to Joshua Siniard, my husband, and I discuss the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities in episode 5, where I quizzed him on different things about adults with disability. Then in the second clip, we'll hear from my sister, Sarah Haupt, from episode 1, where we discuss what supports would Sarah self-advocate for in a work environment. And the final clip in this theme of employment features Brent and Jenny Anderson, the sibling duo of Celebrate EDU from episode 4. In it, they discuss why a traditional job was wrong for Brent, who has autism, and how entrepreneurship has been a more successful and fulfilling occupational route for him. And now with Celebrate EDU, they help support other individuals with disabilities who want to start businesses as well. So, without further ado, let's check out these 3 clips about the theme of employment for adults with disabilities. What percentage of people with disabilities were employed in 2019?
So this is the percentage of everyone with a disability who is employed.
I believe so.
Okay.
You might need to look at the graph to confirm.
Okay. And this is adults with disabilities?
16 and older.
Okay. So working age, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll say 40%.
19.3.
19.3. What's this is a terribly rabbit hole question, but I don't want to derail us, but
What?
unemployment's like the most complicated topic ever. There's like 8 definitions.
Right.
Is that like the standard U6 or?
I don't know.
Your facial expression when I said U6 is also not translated across the podcast.
I'm gonna edit that out. So.
Okay. We'll just include a link to your
to my
picture
face.
of your reaction. There's like different definitions of what unemployed means,
Right.
and there's many. This comes up like every single time someone talks about the unemployment rate.
It's a good question.
Okay, we'll call it. Okay, it's probably I don't know.
Okay.
50 real.
I'll post this in the show notes, though. It is a population survey from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics for persons with a disability.
What would you want someone to know before they work with you? So if you could tell a doctor, teacher, peer, or therapist, etc., what are kind of things they would need to know to kind of help support you the most?
I don't know. I just probably need to be reminded to, like, keep my eyes focused to their faces and some other accommodations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's cool that you can identify that for that kind of self advocacy level, because I think people forget that, like, that a lot of people need reminders to do things too. So yeah, I think that's great. It's good. I try to be really patient with everyone I work with, just because I feel like everyone's got different stuff going on, and try to just learn about people as individuals. Cool.
I think another suggestion is I do tend to take things literally.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point, because if someone makes a joke that's kind of weird, you might you're going to take it literally, and then you're going to be like, well, you told me to do that. It's like, well, so good point, good point. You take English very literally, and that's not a bad thing at all. It's just something that somebody might need to know to support you, so that everyone's on the same page. Because unfortunately, sarcasm is very popular these days and can be hard to read.
Yeah, I've heard it's supposed to run in our family. At least that's what our mom said.
So, as someone with autism, what kind of advice would you give someone with disabilities looking for a job?
Well, I would say try to find something that you're passionate about and see if you can find a way to make a career out of it. Because if you love what you're doing, then it doesn't feel like you're working. You're just doing something that you enjoy.
I love that. That's such good advice. And I think for everybody too, is like, because if you're going to get burnt out otherwise in any kind of position. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would you as like describe the grocery store job like leading to a burnout?
Okay, well,
Classic. Yeah, let's do it.
So basically, at first it wasn't so bad. I accept the fact that I had to wait. My hours started at like 3 a.m, so I had to get up really early and go to work. And mostly I was moving stuff forward on shelves at first, and then I moved into bagging groceries. And it was when I got that's when things started getting bad, because it was fast paced. I had to keep at it without pausing usually, because the lines were just kept coming and all that stuff. I wanted to say what was on my mind to my fellow employees that I was working with, but I couldn't because I had to focus on work. Oftentimes I would not be able to take my breaks or go home on time because they'd ask me to stay longer, and I also got called in on days where I wasn't supposed to be working. So they were supposed to be my days off, and yet I got called in anyway. So, and then basically the only time I ever got any breathing room was when I went out into the parking lot to get grocery carts. But that was the only time I ever got any like breathing room, or when I was on break. And after I would have quit that job in 2 weeks because I did not like it at all. But my mom kind of insisted that I stick to it and say it'll get better, just keep at it and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't get any better. So I left the job after 6 months. So.
Wow, good for you sticking around for 6 months though. Like, knowing you didn't like it so soon, like, And but I'm glad, yeah. And I mean, I'm an entrepreneur too, so I relate. Where it's like I've done jobs where it's like, oh, like it doesn't feel right, and you have some, you have family telling you, oh, keep at it, like it could get better. But like to a certain extent, like you're going to know what's best for you, and it kind of leads to that like self-employment where you can control your own schedule, which I feel like is a huge way to kind of make sure you get the kind of needed breaks that you need in the day, is like being able to control that own schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it was good for Brent to have that experience so that you can realize how great self-employment is, because you have something to compare it to where you're like, I know self-employment can definitely be hard. It's not easy. You still have to motivate yourself. You still have to work. It's not like you just sit around all day. But knowing that the alternative is potentially to go work in a job where your schedule is changing all the time, and those things that are really hard for you, you've got to learn through that experience. And I think one thing that I know at Celebrate, we try to create curricula around understanding yourself and what's important in a work environment, and these different factors that we don't really talk about in school traditionally, around like, what's the best environment for me to work in? And I think a lot of us learned that the hard way. So I know Brent did, but trying to see if there's ways that we can learn that about ourselves before we go try something that doesn't work, is kind of something we've talked about a lot. But I learned a lot from Brent and his experience, and seeing that predictability is huge for him to be successful, knowing his schedule. And when they were changing his schedule all the time, that was just like really hard. So being able to know that that's something important for you to be successful at your business is something you learn the hard way from this grocery store, I feel like.
Yes. Right? Yes, you're absolutely right.
Another topic related to employment that became a theme was focusing on the strengths that individuals with disabilities bring to the workplace and in general. First, we're going to hear a highlight from episode 3 with Olivia McGuire, where she discusses her philosophy around cultivating individual strengths. Then you will hear from Robbie Cheney and Lauren Burgess of Dirt Coffee. In episode 8, they discuss how Robbie's position at Dirt Coffee was developed, which was around his strengths. Let's check out these 2 clips.
And this goes right into the next question I had. So from your work I've seen and what you've just been talking about, starting from scratch is such this like strong community. So how as professionals do you think we could create and support inclusion and community? And kind of like, what tips would you have for people listening and how they can create their own communities or their own cultures of inclusion as well?
That is a great question, Bonnie. Thank you for asking that. I truly think that it stems from appreciating individual strengths. We have to identify the strength and where they, the individual, whomever it might be, can best serve to be a thriving member of the Colorado community. So how can everybody can, but what is specific to them that makes them important and have the ability to serve? So I think it's important to note as well too that where the goal might not be full independence for some, we have to understand that we as a community are opening the window of growth and opportunity for them to find independence at their best, whatever that might look like. So it's truly that authentic independence, opening a mindset to include. And I'll just give you an example. I had an individual, she was through transition, past 21, and it was the what's next? What do I do? Where do I go? How can I keep developing my skills? And she really wanted to be included. And so by time just sitting in her room or not doing anything, by the time that we had connected, it was so amazing to see that she was able to then have 3 volunteer positions at a gym. She was at a horse stable, and her strength just flourished, and she flourished. And then we were able to work more one-on-one, and now she is working in the kitchen with her family. She's included. She's coming down from her room. She's making her own snacks. She's participating in something that some people might have said no to, but we had those community members to say yes, and it's making an impact for them and for her.
What strengths do I bring to work? I learned from a few minor mistakes, and I learned it quickly. I like to keep myself detained at all times, making sure everything's where it needs to be neatly. And I also remind some of my other coworkers the same things. And I think it's just basically trying to be patient with customers who are in a bit of a rush or such, and they're always patient with me, even when I tell them to. And as long as I keep myself focused, I'm good to go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Robbie, what's your favorite thing about working at Dirt?
My favorite thing about working at Dirt is I think it's greeting nicer people and being able to greet others who share a similar disability. And I do my best to be more polite to them and offer them new drinks in case they didn't get the ones they wanted, and always be there whenever they need help with whatever they need.
Oh, that's awesome. I need to get out to Dirt sometime. The pandemic's unfortunately been kind of holding me back, but like it's on my radar. I have to get there. It sounds like such a great environment that you guys have, not only for your employees but for your customers too. And with that, I wanted to ask, what makes Dirt different, kind of business operation wise? How do you meet the needs of the employees? How do you kind of integrate the neurodiverse employees and the neurotypical ones?
Yeah, I think Robbie's story is a great example, and you can probably gather that he is really humble and doesn't brag about all of the things that he brings to the table. And so, for example, Robbie sharing that, you know, he was working somewhere else and that we were finally ready to open up our doors and offered him the management position. And back when we were just starting, we knew that we needed baristas and we knew that we needed managers, and we knew who we wanted those managers to be and who those baristas to be. But we didn't know much more than that. Running an actual brick and mortar versus a mobile coffee truck is night and day difference. So it was actually Robbie who really created and helped us to create the back of house manager position, because that position did not create before or did not exist before Robbie. And that was created because we saw Robbie was super meticulous when it came to anything food prep related and inventory related. We would learn, we would add a brand new panini to our menu, and the vendor would teach us how to make sure to cook it correctly and serve it correctly and make sure that it's all up to par. And Robbie was the one that really helped us hone in on that and say, and catch us too and say, oh, actually I found that this is a better way to do that, and let's make sure we're all doing it the same way. And that consistency is really important. And then that's when we kind of realized, holy moly, Robbie is bringing such a unique strength to the team and making sure that everything we do is super consistent and really high quality. And so we gave him the title of back of house manager with his help to create it because of those specific strengths that he brings and he alone brings, and is every week at our, or every other week at our management meetings, he's the one that's giving us updates about where our inventory is at and any new processes with regards to how we're prepping the foods and preparing the food. So I think that's important because all of our employees bring a unique skill or strength to the table. And something that I think Dirt has been really great at is recognizing and being able to suss out what those unique strengths are and what each individual brings to the table, and then cultivating a position around that. there's this idea out in the world that employers just don't know how to employ people with disabilities, and it's, you know, how do we manage that, or how do we put these modifications in place? But it's really, it's not much different than hiring anybody else. And honestly, if Robbie wasn't who he was, we probably wouldn't have a back of the house manager and would still be kind of a duck underwater, where it's like calm and cool up above, but then the kicking feet down below water, and still trying to figure out what these systems and processes look like.
The next theme is neurodiversity, one I really hope to keep discussing in this new year and to keep learning about. You're going to hear a clip from Jessica Latha from episode 7. Jessica breaks down the definition of neurodiversity and then the definition of neuroqueering, which is a pretty broad topic, but she does a great job at explaining different avenues of it and providing a lot of resources in the show notes as well too. And it's such an important topic that we can continue to nurture as clinicians.
So neurodiversity is just the idea that there is diversity in amongst our brains. We all have different types of brains, and this is just a fact. You know, my brain is different from your brain, is different from the person who checked us out at the grocery store compared to our clients. Like, we all are individuals. We all have individual types of brains. And just like diversity is an idea, like diversity is something that enhances our society. You know, we are better able to succeed as a community because we have different types of people when it comes to race or religion or gender or sexuality or any of these kinds of things. And so in the same way that those elements of diversity enhance our society, you know, neurodiversity can also enhance our society. So neurodiversity kind of has two context. There's neurodiversity as a fact, like it's just a fact. You know, we have biodiversity, there's different types of birds, there's different types of brains, right? But then there's the neurodiversity paradigm, which is like takes that and then puts values onto it. So it says that there's the fact, sorry, I don't know if I'm being clear. There's the fact, and then there's the idea that this is something that's beneficial and something to be embraced and something to be celebrated. And then was there another word that you had?
Yeah, and then neuroqueering, which I mean we'll dive into as well.
So neuroqueering is a word that I feel like a lot less confident to be able to just clearly define. So there are several people who have started to use this term and tried to flesh out some definitions of it. And one is Nick Walker, who is an autistic advocate and writer, and he has a blog called Neurocosmopolitan. And so, you know, that's something that somebody could Google that and pull it up. And he has a great blog where he actually defines like something like maybe 8 different ways to define neuroqueering. And so in my essay, I really just pulled out, I think, maybe 2 definitions and really tried to focus on that because, you know, looking at all 8 definitions is a really big concept. But, you know, roughly it's this idea that something I think a lot of people may not realize is that autistic people, so another way to say that neurodivergent people have maybe a special relationship with gender and sexuality that might be a little bit different. There's a lot more people in the autistic community who are trans, who are queer, who are some form of different sexuality, lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, and the same for gender. And so the community has actually come up with some new terms to describe that gender. So there's gender vague or autigender. And so these are kind of just the idea that, I mean, if you think about it, gender is a performance, you know, it's a social construct. And autistic people often look at social constructs and see them as social constructs. Right. And whereas perhaps neurotypical see the social constructs as something that is more instinctive. I don't know. I can't speak on that as much, but you know, from a neurodivergent perspective, then some of these aspects of gender is very much cultural. It's something that you perform. There's unwritten rules about what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man. And autistic people tend to struggle with some of those kind of arbitrary, performative, unwritten social rules anyway. So it kind of makes sense maybe that more autistic people would be falling outside of the gender binary or the sexuality binder, you know, just being
Right.
something more complex than just being straight. So neuroqueer is about this intersection in between a neurodivergence like autism and your gender or sexuality. And so, you know, people have some people will say that being autistic really influences their gender. And some people will say, like, for them, they feel like that they would say, I'm not trans because I'm autistic. Some people might say they actually feel like their gender identity is directly related to being autistic. So I'm not going to say that it's one or the other, because this is like so personal for every person. But being neuroqueer, neuroqueer as a word, it could be something that is an identity label. So somebody could say, I am neuroqueer, which, you know, might indicate that my neurodivergence impacts my gender performance, my gender identity or my sexuality. But neuroqueer can also be a verb. And so if we are going to, so that is a lot of what my essay was, because like this is an idea that I read about, and I was like, well, I guess I can't show off a podcast, but you know, the make a mind exploding, mind exploding meme.
I could put like the emoji in the show notes. The mind exploding.
Yeah, this idea that, you know, you could neuroqueer as a verb, and that could mean something like, wow, like you're so in that context, to neuroqueer as a verb might mean to like just intentionally be yourself, even if you're being autistic makes your gender performance weird compared to the normal societal expectations. But it's not only just about to neuroqueer is not only about like the person who is neuroqueer being themselves, but you know, so my question in this essay is like, as music therapists, like, can we neuroqueer? Can I neuroqueer in the music therapy space? Can I neuroqueer my therapy? As a therapist, can I do that?
The final theme that appeared in the 2020 episodes was person-centered therapy and positioning our clients with disabilities as the experts of their disability. First, we will hear what person-centered goal-making looks like for Hannah Gallagher in her work from episode 6. Then the last clip highlight from 2020, from the last episode of 2020, episode 9, with Anastasia Canfield, features her advice for professionals who want to position the clients as experts more and learn more about disability culture.
Yeah, when I first joined this organization, I originally started as an instructor, but they saw that I was a music therapist, wanted to utilize my services, but I, you know, the budget's not there for me to be full-time music therapist there. We're growing it, which is great. So I had another position kind of tacked on, and it's kind of evolved over the years, but recently it's person-centered planning coordinator. So there is a huge push, and there has been the past several years in especially the adult sector of person-centered planning, and seeing this implemented in adult day programs, employment programs, things like that. Because for a very long time, we have done a fairly good job. I shouldn't say a very long time. Most recently, we've done a good job of keeping adults with disabilities healthy and safe, and mainly focusing on that. And yes, we want to keep individuals healthy and safe, and that is a huge thing. But we also don't allow a lot of folks with disabilities to take risks or try something new or fulfill their own goals, hopes, and dreams. Many don't have that choice. Many have a team of people working with them, making choices for them. Right. And so the person-centered planning coordinator, we go in and we're looking at how we can make sure that everything we do at our program for the adults that we work with is person-centered. are your goals person-centered? That's a huge thing. So, every individual that we serve has goals. They can range from life skill goals to finding a specific job or gaining a certain work skill to obtain a certain job. But we rarely ask like their hopes and dreams and what they really want. And we focus a lot on what's important for someone versus what's important to someone. And it's about finding that balance between important for and important to. And I use this analogy a lot, but I know exercise is important for me. I understand this. I know that it's going to decrease my stress. Maybe it's going to get me in shape. I'm going to feel stronger. I hate running. So, like, that's not important to me. So how do we find this balance? And we often, I know I've worked in the group homes for many years before being a music therapist, and we often are just focused on, oh, this person has maybe, they may need to lose some weight. They maybe have high blood pressure or something like that. And so we slap a goal on it, like they need to exercise to lose weight, the end of the goal. Well, there's plenty of adults floating around out there with high blood pressure and, high cholesterol and not exercising. So it's not saying, and this is where we have to find that balance, because it's not saying we don't care about this person's well-being. But what are we, how are we serving this person? It is about what they want. And you would also find that when you listen more to what they want, their quality of life may improve. Maybe you find out how this person wants to move their body other than like going to the gym or walking on a treadmill. There's other ways. Music therapists can come in. We can do lots of movement, Yeah, so it's about what the individual wants and making sure that they are heard and people are not really making decisions for them. Yeah, and it's a big thing. It's kind of a mindset that you need to think of. But yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we've answered this, but I did write down a question. I wrote, how can music therapists and other professionals use knowledge about disability culture to be better clinicians? And I think we've been like covering that topic, but if you want to kind of sum up anything or like offer advice in general, what would you want to give as like a takeaway about disability culture for clinicians to do better?
I think there's a couple things. One, definitely read about your population and read. I would not just like, peer reviewed, like that stuff is great. Not demonizing like peer reviewed articles, academic articles, things like that. But in addition to that, also read like autobiographical things by individuals with whatever disability you're working with, or the grander disability group, again, the cultural levels, like their own words, their own writings. Watch TED Talks. There's a lot of people with disabilities who do TED Talks. Like, just normalize hearing from that group what their experiences are. Ask your client. Like, even if it's, sometimes, again, accessibility things, that might get in the way if there are, communication barriers or something like that. But there are always ways that we can get a client's input on something, even if it's like yes or no, this you enjoy this song, or things like that, and then breaking things down, giving them the opportunity to advocate for themselves and read, ask why. If you are in positions where you feel like something's not quite right, and explore your own culture, explore your own biases, explore what is, own those things, because there's nothing wrong with them. The only way that there can be anything wrong with them is, like you said, if we project it and we harm someone in that process. There's nothing wrong with being a white person. It's what we do with our whiteness that can be harmful. There's nothing wrong with being a cis person or an abled person or whatever. It's what we do with those things. And so exploring that and doing self-reflection. For the overachievers out there, going to like disability marches, I think is a really cool experience. Like looking up organizations like Art of Access, and getting involved with things like that. Go to a sensory friendly like museum night or something like that. Start to look at where the ADA violations are in the places where you frequent. And if you want to like be an overachiever, call out those business owners that have the inaccessibility. Like, I mean, don't be like a jerk about it necessarily, unless they're a jerk, then maybe there's maybe there's cause for it, you know. That's up to you. But you know, maybe ask like, is there a reason why the door opens out instead of in? And like explain to them, because a lot of people probably don't even know this stuff, and since they're not being held accountable, yeah, they're gonna just continue with the status quo. But if we start these conversations like, why is the door opening outward instead of inward, or why can't you afford that desk that a wheelchair could fit under, then you know, that will hopefully get some gears turning for people. And looking at our own business models and ethics and laws too, I think, and finding where some of the disparities are. Yeah, doing what we can in our own power. Again, we all need and deserve to make money, but also our clients deserve to have accessible care, and that's a bigger conversation too, if we can factor in like insurance and reimbursement and things like that. But I think that's where I would start.
And that was 2020. If any of those clips sparked your interest, the full episodes are available wherever you listen to podcasts, with more discussion and great resources in the show notes from all the guests. It has been so fun looking back at these conversations with amazing people and all of their knowledge and experience that they've shared with me and you, the listeners. My hope when I started this podcast was to gather resources for professionals who work with adults with disabilities, since it was so hard to find easy, accessible resources online. And I feel like these conversations definitely accomplished that, and there's more resources now out there online, more discussions to start, and just really great resources shared in the show notes that I hope that you'll go back and look at for further reading. And really important discussion topics came up in the episodes, which I'm really excited about continuing to explore with guests in 2021. So in 2021, I want to continue these conversations. I want to continue the resource sharing. I want to continue interviewing people with disabilities, because their perspectives have been so important too. And I really want to say thank you to everybody who's been on the podcast, not only for sharing your knowledge and perspective, but for being vulnerable. There's been a lot of really vulnerable moments shared on this podcast, and I just really want to say I'm really grateful to learn from all the guests that have been on this podcast, and to keep gathering these resources for our community and keep sharing as a community. It really makes my heart so full, kind of reflecting on this previous year. So I'm really excited about the guests that I have lined up for 2021. But if you're also interested in being on this podcast, if you have disabilities or work with individuals with disabilities or both, and feel like you have resources to share knowledge that's important, awareness to grow, I would love to have you on the show. Please send me an email at bonnie@rhythmicrootsmusictherapy.org, and that will also be in the show notes. So to wrap up, I'm going to quickly go over the session plan of the month, which is a January session plan for adults with IDD. So this month, this is our session plan. Hello, It's a New Day for Music by Bonnie Haupt. Drumming, New Year, I'm Ready to Grow, another song by me. Songwriting, Snow Falls by Bonnie Haupt, and coming up with different sensory experiences of being in the snow. then a relaxation sensory intervention called Snowfall Meditation that kind of takes that songwriting and expands it into a meditation. And Goodbye is Na Na Hey Hey Kiss Him Goodbye by Steam. The session plan's pretty general, but a lot of these songs are on YouTube, my YouTube, which I'll put in the show notes as well too if you want to learn some of these songs. And then if you want a really intensive breakdown of how I would implement these music interventions, whether you're a music therapist and wanting to use it in your music therapy sessions, or another professional who works with adults who wants to incorporate more music, that breakdown is available for patrons on patreon.com/navigating adulthood and IDD for $5 a month. Patrons, which I like to call navigators, not only get this awesome session plan breakdown, but you become part of the Navigator community. We have a Facebook group, and we're meeting once a month on Zoom for peer supervision. And you also get episodes 1 week early, ad-free, and just a chance to kind of dig deeper into some of these resources, into some of these discussions, into peer discussions about your own work, and to build that community together. So if you're looking for community, looking for peer supervision, looking to support the podcast, we would love to have you join at patreon.com/navigating adulthood and IDD for $5 a month. Other ways you can support this podcast include rating us on iTunes, sharing with a friend, and just continuing to listen. Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening and for being part of this kind of adventure in 2020 as the podcast kind of continues to grow into what it is, which I think is just sharing these really important perspectives and knowledge from different people in our community, from professionals, from people with disabilities, and really bringing us all into the conversation to make us more aware of issues for adults with disabilities and to gather resources. So thank you again for being a part of this. I'm really excited for what 2021 will bring too. I'll catch you for the next interview in February. This podcast is by Rhythmic Roots Music Services, LLC, with content and music produced by Bonnie Haupt. Thanks for listening.